With coronavirus running rampant through the prison system, inmates at San Quentin have been documenting the pandemic from the inside. The San Quentin News is the only regularly published newspaper in the California prison system. We now welcome in William Drummond, an advisor for the newspaper and the longest tenured professor at the UC Berkeley Journalism School. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
And you joined the San Quentin News as an advisor in 2012. Can you take me through some of your first experiences with the paper? Were there any things that surprised you?
My first encounter with the newspaper in 2012 came about through an educational program called the Prison University Project. And I was invited to teach an introductory journalism course for prisoners. And I did that in the summer of 2012. And it was a course. I taught it the same way that I do it my UC Berkeley students. And after that concluded, one of the students, his name is Juan Haynes, approached me and asked me if I wanted to continue to be involved because they had a newspaper and they could use some professional advice. And I said, oh yeah, I'd be happy to do it. And shortly thereafter, I met the then editor. His name was Arnulfo Garcia, very charming guy, very wise, very knowledgeable. And that's how I became involved. I found that they had a wonderful infrastructure of advisors, professional journalists who were volunteers that came in on a regular basis. They had a copy flow, and I brought in UC Berkeley students as part of their educational program because they really needed some hands-on experience editing people. And so that's been the process for down through these years, and we've trained I think more than 80 UC Berkeley students have taken the class, and dozens and dozens of San Quentin prisoners.
And here we are all these years later, and things have certainly changed, especially last year into this year. How has the COVID-19 pandemic challenged your ability to advise the staff as well as their pursuit of publishing?
You know, I've been heartened because it's the prisoners who've been devoted to this and have been determined to keep it going. The problem is that since COVID broke out in the prison system, we've been unable to go inside. Volunteers, total shutdown, you can't go in. So our normal procedure that we used to follow of going in once a week and sitting down, around a computer and editing face to face with the prisoners, that's no longer possible. But the newspaper went dark for a couple of months, but it was the energy and determination of the prisoners who pushed it, and we were able to get it going again just about 2 or 3 months ago. And what we are doing now it's really an amazing workflow. The men inside report on the stories that they see happening in front of them, and they write those stories out longhand. They write them out longhand, and they put them in the U.S. mail, and they send them out to volunteers. Volunteers transcribe those stories, and volunteers on the outside are able to turn those into copy that is then eventually put in a computer on a hard drive, and it goes to the printer. It's not ideal. It's really labor intensive, and we couldn't do it without the cooperation and determination not only of the volunteers on the outside who are making this happen, including a whole lot of my students, but also the determination of the men inside. They want it to continue, and they feel they have a story to tell, and they want to get it out there.
And let's talk more about that determination. What power would you say these men have in chronicling the pandemic from the inside right now?
Well, they take the long view that the pandemic is just the latest obstacle in their effort to get free. It, the men in prison have encountered obstacles along their way to becoming better men and changing their lives. This is just one more obstacle that they feel they have to overcome. And they have that determination. And this is what inspires all of us who are volunteers to keep going. Well, the way they see it, they are the one voice from the inside that can tell us what is actually going on. And that's a unique perspective. And a lot of them, I should say, are not just writing for the San Quentin News. They're writing for outside publications, the Washington Post, and a number of other publications. And that's the only, in my opinion, that's the only reliable, verifiable word that we get from people who are actually in, I think, the most vulnerable position. They're right up there with the people in the nursing homes.
Yeah, getting it directly from the source. And speaking of writing, in your book, Prison Truth, the story of the San Quentin News, you write about how much of the focus among the inmates on the staff is to write stories of redemption and reconciliation. Why did they choose to take that path as a focus?
Well, I have to be very specific now what we're talking about. There are like 100,000 prisoners, and the ones that I've dealt with are a very, very small minority. And I should say that the ones that I'm dealing with, it's very small staffs, like 25, 30 people on the San Quentin News. These are people that have come to Jesus as far as, rehabilitation is concerned. They know that they have to do something to become better men, and they're determined to do it. Now, I'm not saying I'm not disparaging anybody, but these are the people that I can verify. I've actually worked with, and I know that they're determined to change their lives. And what happens in the process of changing your life is that you have to reconcile with everything you've done. You have to acknowledge it. You have to own up to it. And that's how journalism works, in my opinion. And I try to bring that out in the book, that one of the first steps is to separate what you believe from what you can prove. So the younger writers come into San Quentin News, and they want to take on the whole criminal justice system. Then you sit down with them and say, okay, how come, who's saying this? You're saying that this is all a wreck and it's terrible. No, you got to give me some proof. I want to see quotes. I want to see data. Well, that's step one in separating dogma from proof. It's a big step. When they can do that, then I think they're on the road to understanding what got them into prison in the first place.
Yeah, you have to back up those words. And you mentioned already one of the main people in the book is the former editor-in-chief of the San Quentin News, Arnulfo Garcia. What impact did he leave on you?
You know, I've had a long career in journalism. It's going back like 50 years. And I've met a lot of people in leadership positions. Everybody from Mother Teresa to Yasser Arafat. And so I have a pretty good idea of what a unique human being can be. And I have to say that in my experience, Arnulfo, who's a very humble beginnings in San Jose, he was one of the most inspiring and determined people I have ever met. He had the qualities of a leader in the sense that he was firm, he was compassionate, he had vision. And the longer I worked with him, the more I came to respect him. There are many times when that, mistakes were made and the newspaper was kind of in jeopardy of getting shut down. And he, through his personality and his political acumen, he was able to bring people together, get them sit down, and work things out. In addition to that, he understood the importance of getting influence in Sacramento and elsewhere in the public for looking at incarceration in California. And he did it with a concrete plan. And the newspaper was a vehicle. And it was he was the one that inspired us to start doing these forums in which you bring legislators and judges and district attorneys in to meet with prisoners and to sit around a round table, literally sit around a table and talk about stuff. And they've done dozens and dozens of those. They brought judges and teachers and people like that into the newsroom with one-on-one with prisoners. And I think this, little by little, had an effect. It's made the state of California, I think, reevaluate the years and years and years of tough on crime legislation that was passed under a succession of governors, and it didn't solve anything. It just made everything worse. So now, we're on the downside of that tough on crime, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can review and revise some of the wrongs that were done during that period.
And you also think this will make an effect, turning prisons into colleges. What types of changes do you think that could make in society?
Education, I think we all agree, is the pathway to success. And I look upon the San Quentin News as an adjunct in terms of education. And what I find most heartening is that a lot of the people I've worked with at San Quentin News, they tell me that what they really want to do when they get out is enroll in a university and get a proper degree. And I think their ability to express themselves, and they do so very well, even though a lot of them have, just GEDs, or sometimes, they dropped out of high school at an early age. They've determined to make themselves better men, and they realize that education is a pathway to do that. And so some of them have really promised me that when they get out, what they want to do is enroll in the journalism school at Berkeley. I said, that's what we need. No, seriously, on our side, on the university side, we need more people that have had real life experiences. I mean, real life experiences out on the street and have been in jail, and having them in classrooms. I mean, that is a wonderful resource to work with them as peers side by side. And there are a few universities and colleges. Berkeley has a program called the Underground Scholars, and it's kind of a welcoming platform to get people that have had experience with the prison system into college. San Francisco State has a wonderful program that's been going on for years. I think we need to expand that. And then the Pell Grants are back. For 25 years, they had denied Pell Grants to incarcerated people. If we can get genuine education going in the prisons, I think it would make a big difference.
And you've given your heart and time to education, teaching at UC Berkeley since 1983. What is the experience like advising the San Quentin News staff versus teaching students in your classes?
I have to be frank with you, and you as a journalist can appreciate this. Journalism has a big problem. We're at a crisis. All the local news, with your exception, I have to say you guys do a wonderful job. But all around us, we're watching the collapse of local news. We're seeing people more and more going into getting their news off of the internet, and so it's not the same. And I experienced that over the years at UC Berkeley. And I think it was around about 2005 that I noticed things were really, they were going bad. There was shrinkage in newsrooms. People couldn't get jobs, and the jobs didn't pay well. They became freelance. You know the cycle that I'm talking about. Well, it was around about that time that in 2012 that I first encountered San Quentin News, and that gave me inspiration. It gave me inspiration. I discovered something. I mean, I was about burnt out. I said, well, why am I even doing this? I'm training young people, just turning them loose out there to be freelancers and they're no jobs. I mean, I was going to continue down that route. But once I started working with these prisoners and they saw value in what I had to teach. So I kind of reinvented myself. I said, yeah, I can do that. It's worth getting up in the morning. It's worth recruiting students to become part of this work. And I can say almost without exception that, like I said, there are almost 100 students from UC Berkeley, graduate students, and also a lot of undergrad who've gone through that experience of going over there, sitting face to face with people who have really done terrible things. But when they come away, they realize that nobody should be defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And their friendships that have sprung up, and I think that's valuable. It's valuable not just for the prisoners, but also for the UC Berkeley students, because they discover, they gain confidence because they're dealing with people that come from completely different walks of life, and they have to come to terms with it, speak their language. I mean, that's what education is about. I think that's what I do. That's what UC Berkeley is supposed to do. We're supposed to bring people together from all walks of life and people from different classes and races and all that. There's no better way than to make them come face to face with what the results are of our law enforcement system.
Impactful words for sure, and it's proof, I think, that you can find inspiration in places you never thought you would. William, thank you so much for being frank and for your conversation. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.